The Valkyrie Dominion had conquered 3,000 star systems in less than 100 years, and no force in the known galaxy had ever stopped them. Not even slowed them down for more than a few days at a time. Their warships were not made of metal or crystal, or any material the elder races understood. For these vessels were alive, grown from flesh and bone and hunger. Each one a massive creature bred for nothing but war and destruction. The ships could heal themselves when damaged, adapt to any weapon fired at them, and reproduce in the dark spaces between stars, spawning new horrors with every victory they claimed. Ambassador Torvik of the Stithrani stood in the great chamber of Citadel Station, his crystalline body catching the dim emergency lights that flickered overhead as power systems failed one by one throughout the ancient structure. He watched the tactical display with growing despair as 40,000 bioships surrounded the station, their living hulls pulsing with sickly green and purple light, their tendrils already reaching toward the outer defenses like the fingers of some cosmic predator. "We have perhaps 6 hours before they breach the inner shields," said Counselor Yethra, her own crystalline form trembling with each word she spoke. "And there is nothing left to send against them." The Galactic Council had ruled this region of space for over 50,000 years, guiding younger species, maintaining peace between empires, and believing themselves to be the wisest and most powerful beings in existence. They had been wrong about so many things. The Stithrani had sent their crystalline fleets against the Dominion, ships that could focus starlight into beams of pure destruction. And the Valkyrie had simply absorbed the energy and grown stronger from it. The Mordith Collective had deployed their graviton cannons, weapons that could crush entire moons into dense spheres of matter. And the bioships had evolved countermeasures within hours, bending gravity around themselves like shields. The Aleth had unleashed their psionic warships, vessels crewed by beings of pure thought who could shatter enemy minds across vast distances. And the Dominion had responded by breeding creatures without minds to shatter. Driven only by instinct and rage, every weapon had failed, every strategy had crumbled. And now the last remnants of 12 ancient civilizations huddled together in this dying station, waiting for the end to come. "There must be something we have not tried," Torvik said. Though even as the words left him, he knew how foolish they sounded. The chamber fell silent, except for the distant rumble of Dominion ships testing the outer shields, each impact sending vibrations through the station's bones. Then Counselor Yethra spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper, carrying with it a weight of shame and desperation that Torvik had never heard from one of the elder races. "There is one species we have not contacted," she said. "One civilization we have ignored and dismissed and kept isolated in their small corner of the galaxy." The other council members stirred, confusion rippling through their ancient minds as they tried to understand what she meant. "The humans," Yethra continued, and the word hung in the air like a curse or a prayer. "The soft-bodied primates from the Sol system." Laughter erupted from the Mordith delegate, a harsh sound that echoed off the crystal walls and made Torvik flinch. "You cannot be serious," the Mordith said, his form shifting with amusement and contempt. "Those creatures are barely out of their caves in cosmic terms, playing with primitive fusion drives and chemical rockets while we master the fundamental forces of reality. They have no psionic abilities," another counselor added. "No natural armor, no telepathy, no connection to the quantum foam. Nothing that would make them useful in any conflict. They fight among themselves constantly," the Mordith continued, "killing each other over resources and territory and ideas, proving themselves to be nothing more than animals with delusions of intelligence." Torvik listened to his colleagues dismiss the humans, and he felt something strange stirring in his crystalline core. A memory of rumors and whispers he had heard over the past few decades, strange signals from the Sol system that made no sense according to known physics, ships that appeared and disappeared without using any form of faster-than-light travel. The Council could detect weapons tests that had briefly destabilized the fabric of space-time itself before going silent and hidden once more. We placed monitoring stations around their star, Torvik said slowly, his mind working through the implications of what he was suggesting, to watch them and ensure they did not become a threat. And they never did, the Mortith replied. They remained exactly what we expected them to be. Primitive and violent and limited. Or perhaps, Torvik said, his voice growing stronger as a terrible and wonderful possibility took shape in his thoughts. They showed us exactly what they wanted us to see. The chamber went quiet again, and Torvik could feel the weight of ancient minds considering his words impossible, Counselor Yethra said. But her voice carried doubt now. No species could deceive our sensors and observers for so long, unless they wanted to, Torvik replied. Unless they learned from watching us that the galaxy is full of powers who destroy anything they consider a threat. And they decided to hide their true capabilities until they were ready. Another impact shook the station, stronger this time. And alarms began to wail as another section of shielding failed. We have nothing left to lose, Torvik said, moving toward the communications array at the center of the chamber. If I am wrong, we die here as we were going to die anyway. But if I am right, he did not finish the sentence, because he was not sure what being right would mean. Would the humans come to save them? Or would they reveal themselves to be something even worse than the Dominion? It did not matter anymore, not with death pressing against the walls and time running out like sand. Through broken fingers, Torvik activated the emergency beacon, encoding a message in every language the Council knew, pleading for help from the species they had ignored and dismissed and underestimated. The signal raced outward at faster than light speeds, crossing the vast distances between stars, carrying with it the desperate hope of dying civilizations 62 light-years away, in a corner of the galaxy that the elder races had deemed unimportant. The message reached its destination, and humanity answered. Fleet Admiral Helena Vance stood on the command deck of the UNSC Prometheus, her hands clasped behind her back as she watched the message from the Galactic Council play across the main display screen. Alien who called himself Ambassador Torvik spoke with obvious fear in his voice, describing the enemy fleet surrounding his station, begging for any help that humanity could provide, while also managing to sound condescending and doubtful that the primitive humans could offer anything useful. Vance had spent her entire career preparing for this moment, knowing it would come, waiting with patience that had been passed down through generations of military commanders who understood what humanity truly was. They still think we are children, said Commander Chun, our executive officer, standing at her side with barely contained anger in his voice. Even when asking us for help, they cannot stop looking down on us. Can you blame them? Vance replied without taking her eyes off the display. They have watched us for 300 years and seen only what we wanted them to see. The monitoring stations that the Galactic Council had placed around Sol were laughably primitive compared to what humanity had developed in secret. Simple observation platforms that could be fooled by basic, holographic projections and carefully staged performances for 3 centuries. Humanity had shown the galaxy exactly what it expected to see. A young species struggling with basic spaceflight, fighting among themselves, slowly expanding to nearby worlds while making all the mistakes that primitive civilizations always made behind that mask. Hidden from every sensor and observer the elder races possessed, humanity had been busy. The discovery of quantum entanglement had led to instantaneous communication across any distance, which had led to computers that thought faster than any organic mind, which had led to breakthroughs in physics that the Council could not even imagine. A zero-point energy extraction had given humanity unlimited power, enough to fuel projects that would have seemed like magic to their ancestors, and Then came the greatest achievement of all, the ability to fold space-time itself, to reach into the fabric of reality and bend it to human will. "How many ships are we sending?" Commander Chun asked, pulling up the tactical data on the Dominion fleet. "They have 40,000 bioships, and we need to respond appropriately." Vance turned away from the display and walked toward the strategic planning table at the center of the command deck, where holographic representations of every ship in the human fleet floated in precise formation. "All of them," she said. Chun's face went pale, and several other officers on the deck stopped what they were doing to stare at their admiral. "The Seventh Fleet," Vance continued, her voice calm and steady. "The Black Armada, the Omega Contingent. Every capital ship we have available, Admiral." "That is over 2,000 vessels," Chun said, his voice careful and measured. "The Council only asked for whatever help we could spare, and sending our entire force." "The Council asked for help because they are desperate," Vance interrupted. "They have fought this enemy with everything they have and failed, and now they turn to us as a last resort, expecting us to fail as well." She touched the holographic display, and the ships began to move into new formations, organizing themselves into strike groups and support wings. "We are not going to fail," Vance said. "We are not going to fight a battle, not going to engage in some prolonged campaign that gives this Dominion time to adapt and evolve." Her eyes hardened, and the officers around her felt a chill run through them despite the warmth of the command deck. "We are going to end them," she said, completely, permanently, in a way that the galaxy will never forget. The order went out across human space, transmitted through quantum channels that move faster than light, reaching every colony world and military installation in seconds on Mars. The shipyards that had been hidden beneath the red dust for 200 years opened their doors, releasing vessels that had never been seen by any alien eye on Europa. The Black Armada emerged from beneath the frozen ocean, ships designed for one purpose: the complete annihilation of any threat to humanity in the asteroid belt. The Omega Contingent powered up weapons that had only been tested in the deepest regions of space, far from any observer. Weapons that did not simply destroy matter, but erased it from existence itself. And at the heart of the fleet, the Prometheus waited, 7 kilometers of angular armor and impossible technology, carrying weapons that humanity had hoped they would never need to use. "Admiral," one of the communications officers called out, "we are receiving transmissions from the Council station. They want to know our estimated time of arrival and the size of our response force." Vance smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Only the cold satisfaction of a predator about to reveal itself. "Tell them we will arrive within the hour," she said, "and that they should prepare for our arrival." "What about the size of our fleet?" the officer asked. "They will see soon enough," Vance replied across 100 colony worlds. Fusion drives ignited in unison, filling the darkness of space with light bright enough to be seen from neighboring star system ships that the galaxy had never imagined began to move, accelerating toward jump points where reality would bend and break and reform around them. The great chamber of Citadel Station. Ambassador Torvik watched his sensors go blind as something impossible happened in the Sol system. An energy spike so massive that it briefly outshone the human sun itself. What was that? Counselor Yethra asked, her crystalline form flickering with fear. "What are they doing?" Torvik did not answer because he did not know. Because nothing in 50,000 years of Galactic Council history had prepared him for what he was seeing. The humans were coming, and they were bringing something terrible with them, something that would change everything. "May the cosmic powers help us all," Torvik whispered to himself, uncertain whether he was praying for salvation from the Dominion or protection from whatever humanity was about to unleash in the cold spaces between stars. The human fleet began its final preparations, loading weapons that should not exist. running calculations that bent the laws of physics, and remembering all the wars they had fought across their bloody history. Humanity had learned to fight in the mud and blood of ancient battlefields, in the trenches of world wars, in the nuclear fire that had almost ended everything. They had looked into the abyss of their own extinction and refused to die now. They would show the galaxy what that refusal had created. The Valkyrie Dominion fleet had surrounded Citadel Station completely. 40,000 bioships forming a living sphere of hunger and death around the last stronghold of the Galactic Council inside the station. The survivors of 12 ancient civilizations huddled together in the central chambers, watching their shields fail section by section as the enemy tested their defenses with patient, predatory precision. Ambassador Torvik stood at the observation window, his crystalline body catching the sickly light of the bioships as they pulsed and writhed in the void, their organic forms shifting constantly as they prepared for the final assault. "The outer shields will fall within the hour," reported a Mordith technician, his voice flat with acceptance of the inevitable. "And once they breach the hull, we will have perhaps 30 minutes before they reach this chamber." Counselor Yethra moved to stand beside Torvik, her own crystalline form dimmer than he had ever seen it, as if the light of hope itself was fading from within her. "The humans have not responded since their initial acknowledgement," she said. "Perhaps they cannot help us after all. Perhaps we were foolish to believe that primitives could make any difference against such overwhelming force." Torvik did not reply, because he was watching something strange happening at the edge of his vision. A flickering in the starfield beyond the Dominion fleet that made no sense according to any physics he understood. The stars were disappearing, not being blocked by ships or hidden by weapons fire, but actually vanishing from existence, replaced by patches of absolute darkness that seemed to swallow light itself. "What is that?" Yethra asked, her voice rising with new fear. "What is happening out there?" Before Torvik could answer, the darkness began to scream. The sound was impossible in the vacuum of space, yet every being on the station heard it, felt it vibrating through their bodies and minds as reality itself protested against what was being done to it. 2,000 points of absolute blackness tore open across the battlefield, wounds in the fabric of space-time that bled light and energy in colors that no organic eye was meant to see. And from those wounds, the human fleet emerged. The ships were nothing like anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Massive angular constructs of dark metal and glowing weapon arrays that defied every principle of elegant design the elder races had developed over millennia. Where the Sitharani built ships of crystal beauty and the Mordith crafted vessels of flowing gravity. These human warships were brutal monuments toward self, covered in armor plates and weapon systems that seemed designed to inflict maximum destruction with no concern for aesthetics. Each hull was marked with words in the human language, names that meant nothing to Torvik, but carried a weight of history he could somehow feel. Stalingrad, Thermopylae, Verdun, Gettysburg. Names that spoke of battles where humanity had bled and suffered and refused to surrender. At the center of the formation, a ship emerged that dwarfed everything around it. 7 kilometers of angular armor and impossible technology, bristling with weapons that made the Dominion bioships look like insects by comparison. The UNSC Prometheus had arrived, by all the stars, Counselor Yethra whispered, her crystalline form flickering with something between hope and terror. "There are so many of them." Torvik could not speak, could not process what his sensors were telling him about the energy signatures radiating from those human ships. Readings that suggested technologies far beyond anything the Council had ever imagined. The Dominion fleet reacted immediately. 40,000 bioships turning their attention away from the station and toward this new threat. Their organic forms shifting and adapting as they prepared to face these unexpected arrivals. Tendrils of biological matter reached out from the nearest Dominion vessels, trying to establish contact with the human ships, trying to analyze and adapt as they had done against every enemy before. Then a voice spoke across all frequencies, broadcast in every language known to the galaxy. And the tone of that voice made Torvik's crystalline core vibrate with something he had not felt in centuries. Genuine fear. "This is Fleet Admiral Helena Vance of the United Nations Space Command," the voice said, cold and calm and utterly confident. "You are engaged in hostile action against species under humanity's protection." The bioships continued their approach, either unable to understand the message or simply not caring about the words of these new arrivals. "You have 30 seconds to withdraw your forces from this system," Admiral Vance continued. And Torvik could hear something terrible lurking beneath the calm surface of her voice. "This is not a negotiation. This is not a request. This is your only warning." The Dominion response came not in words but in action, as the leading edge of their fleet surged toward the human ships. Biological weapons priming, adaptive systems analyzing, confident in the numerical superiority that had crushed every enemy before 30 seconds passed. The human ships did not move, did not flee, did not even seem concerned about the wall of death racing toward them. "Weapons free," Admiral Vance said. And those two words changed everything across the human fleet. Weapon systems that had never been seen by any alien eye began to activate, and reality itself seemed to hold its breath as something unprecedented was about to happen. Torvik watched, unable to look away as the leading wave of Dominion ships over. 3,000 biovessels that had conquered worlds and slaughtered billions reached firing range of the human fleet, and then those ships simply ceased to exist, not destroyed, not vaporized, not torn apart by weapons fire, but erased, removed from existence so completely that even the light they had been reflecting vanished in the same instant. One moment 3,000 ships were there. The next moment they were gone, replaced by ripples in space-time that spread outward like waves in a cosmic pond. The observation chamber fell absolutely silent, every being watching, from the lowest technician to the most ancient counselor, understood in that moment that they had made a terrible mistake in dismissing humanity as primitives. These were not beings who had just learned to build weapons. These were beings who had learned to break reality itself, and they were just getting started. The Dominion fleet had never encountered anything it could not adapt to, could not overcome, could not eventually consume and add to its endless hunger for conquest in 100 years of war across 3,000 star systems. The bioships had faced energy weapons and learned to absorb them, faced kinetic strikes and learned to regenerate from them, faced psionic attacks and evolved minds that could not be touched, but they had never faced weapons that did not play by the rules of reality itself. The second wave of Dominion ships surged forward, learning from what had happened to the first wave, their organic systems shifting and changing as they tried to develop countermeasures against whatever the humans had used. They never got the chance across the human fleet. A different weapon system activated, and this time the Council observers could see what was happening. Though they could not begin to understand it, missiles launched from the human ships, thousands of them streaking toward the Dominion formation. But these were not ordinary missiles, carrying conventional warheads. Each one contained a payload of antimatter held in perfect magnetic suspension. And when they reached their targets, they did not simply explode. They converted matter directly into cascading annihilation reactions, turning Dominion ships into expanding spheres of pure destruction that consumed everything they touched, including the ships behind them. The second wave of 5,000 biovessels became a chain reaction of mutual annihilation, each destroyed ship feeding the destruction of its neighbors, until the entire formation was nothing but expanding clouds of exotic particles and hard radiation. "Impossible," Counselor Yethra whispered, her crystalline form pulsing with disbelief. No species can produce antimatter in such quantities. The energy requirements alone would drain a star, but the humans clearly could produce it. And they clearly had more to spare the Dominion command ships. The massive organic flagships that directed the lesser biovessels through some form of hive consciousness finally began to understand that they were facing something entirely beyond their experience. They turned to flee, sending desperate signals to their homeworld, trying to warn the rest of the Dominion about what they had encountered. Admiral Vance watched them run from the command deck of the Prometheus, her expression showing no satisfaction, no mercy, only cold calculation. "Activate the reality anchors," she ordered. "We cannot allow any of them to escape," and warn the others. Specialized vessels throughout the human fleet powered up systems that made the antimatter weapons look primitive by comparison. Focusing beams of something that was not quite energy and not quite matter toward the fleeing command ships, the beams struck, and the Dominion flagships simply stopped. They did not slow down or power down or surrender. They stopped, frozen in place as if time itself had ceased to flow around them. Torvek's sensors could not make sense of what he was seeing, returning readings that suggested the ships were somehow existing in a different temporal state than the rest of the universe, trapped between one moment and the next for eternity. "They have imprisoned them in time," the Mortis delegate said, his voice hollow with shock. "The humans have found a way to weaponize time itself." The remaining Dominion ships, now reduced from 40,000 to less than 15,000, did something that Torvik had never seen in all the records of the Council's war against them. They panicked. BO ships that had never known fear began to scatter in all directions, their organic systems overriding whatever tactical programming they possessed. In a desperate attempt to survive, some tried to ram the human ships, hoping that physical contact would allow them to consume and adapt. As they had done to so many enemies before, the human ships simply maneuvered out of the way, their drives producing acceleration that should have been impossible for vessels of their size. Dodging the desperate charges while continuing to fire weapon after weapon into the fleeing swarm, some Dominion ships tried to activate their faster-than-light drives, attempting to flee into the safety of higher dimensions where they could regroup and plan. The humans had anticipated this, and specialized warships called dimension locks activated systems that sealed local space-time against any attempt to leave normal reality, trapping the bioships in a cage they could not escape. Formats. Commander Chun reported from his station on the Prometheus. "We have reduced their fleet to approximately 2,000 vessels in 4 minutes of combat." Admiral Vance nodded, but her attention was focused on one ship in particular, the largest of the Dominion command vessels, which was making a desperate run toward the edge of the engagement zone. This was the flagship of the entire assault fleet, the vessel that contained the genetic templates and strategic memories of the Volcari expansion. And if it escaped, the Dominion could rebuild everything they had lost. "That one cannot be allowed to flee," Vance said, her voice carrying a weight of finality that made every officer on the command deck stand straighter. "Activate the primary weapon." The Prometheus had been built around a single weapon system, a device that humanity had created in their darkest hours and hoped they would never need to use. They called it the last argument. Deep within the flagship, reactors that drew power directly from the quantum foam of space-time itself began to charge, building energy levels that the Council's sensors registered as impossible, as errors in their equipment, as readings that simply could not be real. The main gun of the Prometheus aligned itself with the fleeing Dominion flagship, and for a moment, everything was still. Then the weapon fired a beam of compressed space-time struck the Dominion vessel, and the ship did not explode, did not vaporize, did not break apart. It simply ceased to have ever existed. The beam erased the ship not just from the present, but from history itself, reaching back through time to remove every trace of its existence from the fabric of reality. The crew had never been born. The ship had never been grown. The orders for this assault had never been given. The only reason anyone in the fleet remembered the ship at all was because the humans had designed the last argument with a safety feature that preserved the memories of those who witnessed its use otherwise. No one would have known there was ever anything to remember. The battlefield fell silent, where 40,000 warships had surrounded Citadel Station just minutes before. There was now only debris and temporal anomalies and the dark, angular shapes of the human fleet. The battle, if it could even be called that, was over, and humanity had not lost a single ship. The great chamber of Citadel Station had fallen completely silent. Every being within its walls, staring at sensor displays that showed them information they could not accept, could not process, could not reconcile with everything they had believed about the universe ambassador. Torvik stood motionless before the main tactical screen, his crystalline mind running calculations over and over again, trying to find some error in the data that would make sense of what he had just witnessed for minutes and 17 seconds. That was how long the battle had lasted, from the first human weapon firing to the last Dominion ship being destroyed or imprisoned or erased from existence. 40,000 bioships, the terror of the galaxy, the unstoppable force that had conquered 3,000 star systems, reduced to nothing by a species the Council had dismissed as primitive. How? Counselor Yethra asked, her voice barely audible. How is this possible? No one answered. Because no one had an answer that made any sense, the human fleet held position outside the station, their angular warships forming a protective perimeter around the damaged structure, their weapons still powered and ready in case any Dominion survivors emerged from the debris field. Then, the main communication screen activated, and the face of Fleet Admiral Helena Vance appeared before the Council, her expression calm and unreadable in a way that made Torvik deeply uncomfortable. The immediate threat has been neutralized, she said, her voice carrying the same cold confidence it had held throughout the battle. We have dispatched secondary fleets to the Volcari core systems to ensure they cannot rebuild their forces. The Mordith delegate, who had laughed at the idea of asking humans for help just hours ago, stepped forward with obvious difficulty, his form shifting with emotions he could not control. What have you done to their homeworld? He asked. And for the first time in his ancient life, there was fear in his voice when speaking to a younger species. Their homeworld has been quarantined, Vance replied. We have established a temporal barrier around the entire system that will prevent anything from leaving or entering for approximately 10,000 years. You imprisoned an entire civilization in time, Yethra said, horror creeping into her crystalline voice. We chose mercy, Vance replied, and something in her tone suggested that other options had been considered and rejected. They will survive, they will have time to reflect on their choices. And when the barrier falls, they will have the opportunity to rejoin the galactic community as a peaceful species. Or they will emerge angrier and more dangerous than before, the Mordith delegate said. Then we will be waiting for them. Vance replied simply. Torvik finally found his voice, stepping forward to address the human admiral directly, his crystalline form flickering with the weight of questions he needed to ask. How long have you been capable of this? He asked. How long have you possessed weapons that can break time and erase matter from existence? Admiral Vance's expression softened slightly, just enough to show that she understood the fear behind his question. Since before you placed your first monitoring satellites around our sun, she answered. We detected your observers within days of their arrival, analyzed their technology within weeks, and began developing countermeasures within months. But you showed us nothing, Yethra said. Your ships, your weapons, your communications, everything we observed suggested you were still struggling with basic interplanetary travel. We showed you what you expected to see, Vance replied. What you wanted to see. What made you comfortable enough to leave us alone while we continued to develop in peace? Why? Torvik asked. And this was the question that had been burning in his mind since the first human ship emerged from that wound in space-time. Why hide from us? Why pretend to be weak when you possessed such overwhelming power? The Admiral was silent for a long moment. And when she spoke again, her voice carried a weight of history and pain that Torvik had not expected. Because we remember what we were, she said. 300 years ago, before we discovered faster-than-light travel, before we united as a species, before we built any of the weapons you saw today, we were monsters. The council members exchanged confused glances. Uncertain what she meant, we burned our own world with nuclear fire, Vance continued. We slaughtered billions of our own kind over differences in skin color and belief and territory. We came within hours of ending our entire civilization through our own stupidity and hatred. She paused. Letting those words sink in, we looked into the abyss of our own extinction, and we saw what we truly were. And we were horrified. Torvik felt something shift in his understanding of these beings. These soft-bodied primates who had hidden godlike power behind a mask of weakness. The weapons we built were not created to conquer the galaxy, Vance said. They were created as a last resort against threats we hoped would never come. While we spent 3 centuries learning to be something better than what we had been, you were afraid you would become another dominion, Torvik said, understanding finally dawning in his crystalline mind. We were certain we would become worse, Vance replied, unless we took the time to build not just weapons, but wisdom, not just power, but restraint. She straightened slightly, and her expression shifted from reflective to determined. The galaxy will now face a choice, she said. You can continue as you have for 50,000 years, treating younger species as threats or curiosities, allowing empires like the Dominion to rise and consume, maintaining your careful balance of power while billions suffer under conquest and oppression. The council members shifted uncomfortably, recognizing the truth in her words. Or you can build something better, Vance continued. Something that includes all species, all civilizations, working together to face the challenges that await us in the universe beyond what we have explored. What challenges? The Mortis delegate asked, suspicion still coloring his voice. There are things in the darkness between galaxies that make the Dominion look like children playing with toys, Vance replied. And for the first time, Torvik heard a hint of genuine fear in her voice. We have seen them in our deep space observations. We have detected their signals in the cosmic background, and we know they are coming. Eventually, she let that information settle over the council like a cold weight. Humanity will help you prepare, she said. We will share what we have learned, not just the weapons, but the lessons that came with nearly destroying ourselves. The understanding that power without wisdom is just another form of self-destruction. Her expression warmed slightly. The first genuine emotion Torvik had seen from her, and in return, we ask for something we have never had. Friends, allies, civilizations who can remind us why fighting matters, who can help us stay true to the better angels of our nature when the darkness comes. The transmission ended, and the council chamber fell silent once more. But this silence was different from the hopeless quiet that had filled the room before the humans arrived. This was the silence of possibility, of change, of a galaxy that would never be the same. Outside the station, the human fleet waited patiently, their weapons powered down but ready, their crews looking out at stars that suddenly seemed full of both danger and hope. Humanity had arrived, and they had brought with them not just the power to destroy, but the chance to build something worth protecting across the galaxy. Species who had lived under the shadow of the Dominion for generations received word of what had happened, of the impossible victory won by beings the elder races had dismissed as primitives And in that moment, everything changed. The stars themselves seemed brighter somehow, as if the universe itself was celebrating the dawn of a new era, an era where humanity would stand as protectors, teachers, and friends to all who chose to stand with them, an era where the darkness between galaxies would find itself facing not divided civilizations struggling alone, but a united front of species who had learned, finally, that together they were stronger than any threat the cosmos could produce. The story of the galaxy was being rewritten, and humanity held the pen. What they would write with it remained to be seen. But for the first time in a very long time, the future looked bright.